Hi, I'm Clem Kelleher from Celtic Hypnosis, and I'm looking forward to meeting you for your stop smoking session. So this is we'll try and make it a short video to give you some information on smoking, get your head around smoking and cigarettes and the effect they have on your body, just so that you're prepared when you come here to see me so we can get the maximum benefit out of the session. So first of all, we're going to look at the two main things that are in smoke that cause the most damage. And the first obviously is tar, and the second is nicotine. But before we get into that, a question I always ask, a tricky question, is I'd ask someone, what is smoke? So if I ask you, what is smoke? How would you answer that? Now, you'd probably answer in the same way that in the last 15 years I've been asking this question. I've never really got a clear answer to it. So what is smoke? People talk about smoke being a vapor, but a vapor is a liquid. So smoke isn't really a liquid because you're setting fire to dry stuff. So it can't really cause a liquid. So what is it? If you think about it, nicotine and tar are in smoke. So if this room was filled with smoke, then nicotine and tar would be in the room. Now, why can't we see it? The simple answer is because it's too small. And there's the clue. So if nicotine and tar are in the smoke and the smoke is in the room and we can't see the nicotine or tar because it's too small, then that gives you a clue. Smoke is basically made up of billions of tiny particles that fill a room. They're so small that we can't make them out. So instead, smoke looks like a single fluid entity. That's why it tends to look like a mist. But even a mist is made up of billions of tiny little water drops. Smoke is made up of not of vapor drops, but it's made up of little tiny bits of solid material. Now there's gases mixed in there as well. There's, when you set fire to smoking, there's carbon monoxide and other gases are released. But the part that you see is little tiny bits of the stuff that you set fire to, of the tobacco leaves, the dried tobacco leaves that you set fire to, and of course the paper. Smoke is basically made up of little tiny bits of physical particles. So dust is the word that we use to describe tiny little particles of solid material. Smoke is basically made up of billions of tiny particles of physical stuff, dust basically. And those little particles are made up of lots and lots of different things. And among those things are nicotine and tar. So if you look at it, you breathe in these smoke particles, and some of these particles are tar. And tar is, we'll have a picture of it here popping up somewhere. Here, there we are. Tar is like a yellow, orangey, reddy, honey-like color, a sticky substance, really tiny. When you magnify it, you can see like little drops. So when you breathe in that tar, it gets into your lungs. Now I'm going to pause it there and we'll just talk about your lungs for a moment. So your lungs are, think of your lungs as being two bags, for example. And in those bags, you've got all these little fibers, or you could call them branches. And those branches are called bronchioli. So a little model of it here. So here's a little model of, there we go. There's the branches, the bronchioli. I haven't got that right, have I? There you go. So there you go. Now you can see, if I can hold this without breaking it. There we go. So all along these branches here, now this is obviously a model. So your lungs are actually filled with all of these. And all along these branches, you've little kind of holes, actually technically little bits of what they call sacs, but let's just call them holes that absorb whatever you breathe in. So when you breathe in air, for example, the bag here is filled with air. But these, all along these branches, these little holes, little air sacs are called alveoli. And these little bits of alveoli, they absorb the oxygen from the air that you breathe. And it's the oxygen that gets absorbed into the branches and gets absorbed into your bloodstream. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole purpose of breathing in. So the oxygen gets into your blood, and oxygen makes your blood flow so much easier, so much more fluidly. And because your blood is so fluid, your heart does not have to work very hard to push it through your arteries. So it moves much easier. And then the oxygen in the blood gets distributed everywhere because your blood gets everywhere and it brings the oxygen everywhere. Now, why is that important? It's important because you and I and everybody else are made up of things called cells. Oxygen keeps cells alive, and we are made up of cells. So we take the oxygen from the air that we breathe. The oxygen is absorbed from the branches in your lungs. So the fastest way to get something into your bloodstream is by inhaling it. When you inhale smoke from a cigarette, all those billions of smoke particles, just to show it here again, and I'll have another model here popping up on this screen, you'll see it there now, just now, fills the lung, the bag in the lung, if you like, full of billions of tiny little bits of particles. And those particles will touch off everything here in the lungs. And you'll fill it up when you breathe in, and then when you exhale, a lot of those particles will leave, but not all of them. Because some of those particles are tar, and tar is sticky. So it sticks to the branches in the lungs. So when you exhale, the tar is left here stuck to the branches. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, because it's on the branches, then it starts to cover the little alveoli. And it sticks there and it hardens. So in short, there is less oxygen getting into your bloodstream. So if more oxygen in your blood makes your blood more fluid, then less oxygen makes your blood thicker, and therefore less fluid. So your heart has to work harder to push this thick blood through your arteries, so your blood pressure increases. Your heart is working harder. Your blood is getting thicker. If you imagine your arteries, it's the poisonous dust is eating away at the arteries inside. It's eating away at the inner walls of your arteries, making your arteries weaker. They get thinner and weaker. So if your blood getting thicker because of lack of oxygen, and the pipes, that's the arteries, are getting weaker. So the best analogy I have here is that, particularly nowadays, if you go to, let's say, a fast food joint, maybe we can say McDonald's because nobody's really watching this except you and me. And now they're using paper straws. The paper straws are okay for Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola moves very easily through the straws, but the thick milkshake becomes a challenge now. I've got kids, I'm a regular visitor to McDonald's, and they've just given up on the milkshakes. Because the milkshake is so thick, it gets stuck to the inner wall, inner tube of the straw, and the straws break up, they weaken. Now, this is exactly what happens really in your arteries. Your arteries weaken. And when they weaken, then your heart is still pushing, it's working harder. So you're more liable to have an exposure, a break or a blockage in your arteries due to the blood being thicker and the arteries being weaker. And if that blockage occurs below the neck, anywhere around your body, it's like having a crash on a motorway. It backs all the way up to the heart, to the output of the heart, and your heart just stops. If it happens above the neck, then the blood flow in your brain stops. Certain cells in your brain are deprived of oxygen for a long period of time and they die, and that's called a stroke. So that's one of the main reasons why tar can cause big problems. The other problem is that these alveoli also allow your body to release carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is what's called an asphyxiant. It's poisonous to us, you could say, but it's an asphyxiant. It absorbs oxygen, or as I describe it, it eats oxygen, just for drama, but it's true. Carbon dioxide is formed within our bodies, but our bodies need oxygen to live. So we need to get rid of the carbon dioxide. We need less carbon dioxide in our bodies and we need more oxygen. So our bodies get rid of the carbon dioxide. How do our bodies do that? When you breathe in, you fill your lungs full of air. The little alveoli all along the branches inside your lungs absorb the oxygen, pull the oxygen from the air in the same way a sponge absorbs water, if you like, but they absorb air in a similar fashion through tiny little holes. You have about 300 million of these little alveoli in your lungs. These are dimensions that you cannot get your head around. Imagine how small these particles of smoke dust are, how small these little alveoli are, 300 million. Dimensions you can't get your head around. So they absorb the oxygen in, and these little alveoli absorb oxygen and then release carbon dioxide. So every second of your life, every time you breathe, these little alveoli are either taking in oxygen or releasing carbon dioxide. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. So what happens when you breathe in tar and the tar blocks the alveoli? the carbon dioxide travels up to get out, but it can't get out because the alveoli is blocked. So carbon dioxide gets trapped inside your lungs. This is not a good thing. And over the years, over the decades particularly, the amount of oxygen that you're getting into your body goes down. The amount of carbon dioxide inside your lungs goes up. So it reaches what's called a tipping point, a point of saturation. The carbon dioxide starts to spread throughout your lungs. That's not a good thing. And how it spreads is that it attacks the cells in your lungs to get at the oxygen because it wants to eat the oxygen. It attacks the cells. So the carbon dioxide spreads through your lungs, multiple cells at a time. Your lungs are essentially dying multiple cells at a time. And in extreme circumstances, I am describing here a condition called emphysema. Emphysema is typically diagnosed among people who are in their mid-50s upwards. But there is another version, another chronic lung disease or condition that's called COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, one of the fastest growing diseases in the world, believe it or not. And over 85% of that is purely down to cigarette smoke. And COPD can be diagnosed in people in their 40s. I've worked with people in their late 30s who've been diagnosed with COPD. So the key example here is in the context of tar. Tar blocks the alveoli in your lungs. It deprives your body of oxygen. Therefore, your lungs are essentially getting smaller. It also prevents your lungs from getting rid of carbon dioxide. So your lungs are collecting carbon dioxide, which will eventually cause some serious lung disease. If you think about it, if you're smoking to relieve yourself of stress, imagine this. As you smoke, every time you inhale, your lungs are getting smaller. Your lung capacity is reducing. So imagine, the analogy I use is that, imagine you're in your boat and you're about to get out there into life and discover new things. Discover a big ocean of opportunity. And your boat has a furnace that fuels the engine. The fuel that supplies that engine is wood. And the wood that you use to supply that engine is coming from your boat. You're essentially breaking off bits of your boat to fuel your boat. It's nasty. That's a nasty idea. Think about it. As you move through life, as you engage out there exploring the ocean, your boat is getting smaller. When you smoke, as you move through life, your lungs are getting smaller. Your life is getting smaller. So if you're using cigarettes to help you cope and you're waiting for everything to be right at some point in your life, maybe when you're a bit older, you're more financially secure, more emotionally secure. Basically, the kids have left the house. If you're waiting for that to really live your life, then you might find that by the time you get there, you've got a very small boat. Your world has become very small. So let's look at the other side. So the other thing in smoke, the other tiny particle in the room is a thing called nicotine. Nicotine is a poison. Nicotine is one of the most poisonous substances on the planet. And I don't mean poison as if I'm calling it names. We call food we don't like, tastes like poison. No, nicotine is an actual poison. The primary use of nicotine outside of naturally occurring in tobacco leaves is that it's extracted from tobacco leaves and used as an insecticide or pesticide in industrial farms and places that grow fruit and things and veg. The nicotine is used to kill the stuff that destroys all the produce, if you like, or affects the productivity. And it was one of the primary insecticide and pesticides used for many years, but that's changed recently, by the way. Nicotine as an insecticide and pesticide is now banned within the EU. This is crazy stuff. It's actually banned in the EU because it's too poisonous. And it's been replaced by a version of nicotine that has been developed synthetically. I think it's called a nicotinoid, which is a synthetic version of nicotine, because the synthetic version of nicotine is less poisonous than the real thing. It's incredible. Outside of the EU, nicotine products are still used. A number of years ago, I used to do this. If I was in Woodies or B&Q or one of those places, I would go to the insecticides and pesticides, just the ones that you might use for the garden, and look at the back of them, and I'd read the back, And out of all these ingredients, all these chemicals I can't even pronounce, and in the middle you'd have nicotine, 0.046% or something very small. And that was the stuff that kills the things. Incredible. I used to giggle to myself, just to remind myself that I'm speaking the truth. But recently, over the recent years, I noticed it went missing. And I had to look it up, I had to find it. You have to go through an awful lot of, a lot of jargon, a lot of stuff on the internet to get to some facts when it comes to nicotine and smoking. But yeah, you won't see a nicotinoid on the list of ingredients because nicotinoid is the actual chemical name. So what you'll see is brand names on the back of the insecticides and pesticides. But it's there, nicotinoids. So nicotine is very poisonous. So again, you're breathing in this dust, these particles, some of this dust that's filling up your lungs. And what's happening is it's getting into the bloodstream. So these dust particles are getting into the bloodstream. And when they're in the blood, nicotine, for example, is eating away at the inner walls of your arteries. Just imagine inner walls eating away. There we go. Down here. Okay, I'm not doing a good job there. But it's eating away inside the circle, especially something like nicotine, which is so poisonous, etching away, corroding the inner walls of your arteries, making your arteries thinner. So your arteries are getting thinner because they're being constantly put into direct contact with these poisonous particles, and the blood is getting thicker. So you're more likely to have that anomaly, that blockage below the neck, heart attack, above the neck, stroke. Either way, life for you has changed in an instant. And you might dismiss that, but the people who have to care for you can't dismiss that as easily. I don't mean to be flippant, but there we go. Now, what else can nicotine do? Think about it. It's in your bloodstream. So your nicotine is going right to, your blood goes everywhere. So the nicotine is going everywhere. And everywhere is made up of cells. So when nicotine comes into contact with these cells, it can destroy the cells. It can cause destruction. So the cells, they're impacted. They come into contact with the nicotine. I'm not doing a good job of cells here, but they come into contact. Nicotine here comes into contact with your cells, and it affects the cells it touches. The cells essentially die. But don't panic. You kill cells when you just cut your finger with a paper cut, the worst injury you can have. Doctors and surgeons don't heal cuts. They clean and disinfect cuts. And then they put the two pieces of meat together and the cells regenerate, they regrow. And if it's not a major big scar, then it all comes back and you can't remember which finger you cut. So your cells regenerate, they regrow. But when nicotine comes into contact with your cells, it kills the cells it touches. Your cells regenerate, they regrow, but they're regrowing over the poisonous area. This is a problem. They grow sickly or malignant. And because they're sick, they get into a frenzy of trying to heal themselves. They grow faster trying to heal themselves. Like the body, how the body responds to an anaphylactic shock from a bee sting, for example. It gets into a frenzy of trying to protect you, so it blocks up your throat and things, and it's bad. So don't do me any favors, body, but the body responds. Similarly, the cells in your body build up, and they grow quicker and quicker, so you end up getting continuous growth of sick or malignant cells growing from one of your organs. And what do we call that? What do we call something that grows up from one of your organs? We call it a tumor, cancer. Now, this can happen even if you don't smoke. Your cells are always dying and regenerating and being replaced, so you can get these anomalies. But when you're smoking, if you think of your bloodstream as supplying your entire body with all the nutrients, oxygen, and things that it needs, your blood is keeping your cells supplied with what the cells need to be alive. And if you have poisonous dust or particles in your blood, you're exposing your entire body to these substances. Now, I know people say, look, I could get hit by a bus in the morning, but what if you keep dodging buses? What if the buses don't get you? All you have to do is stay alive long enough to find out how smoking is going to impact you. And don't be fooled. A lot of people are out there thinking they're going to quit smoking in the long term. But because your blood is getting thicker, your arteries are getting weaker, these things can happen in an instant. Nothing good can come of putting toxic, poisonous dust particles into your body. So there are the two major things I want to talk to you about, just to prepare you for the sessions. But the purpose of this video is not to put you off cigarettes, to stop you smoking. The purpose of this video is just to get some information into your mind. And when you come here, we're going to help you to feed your brain with so much information about what smoking does to you to help you make a better decision when you leave here. Most of the things I spoke about here, you're sort of already aware of, maybe never heard it being put in that way. So you make a decision to smoke. You do it every day. And that's simply because of information. We make decisions based on information. So you have lots and lots of information as to why you should smoke, what smoking does for you, you know what it gives you. You are a world expert on smoking. There's nobody in the world knows more about what smoking does for you than you. Now, what smoking does to you, that information is not as strong. So if you've a decision to make and you've lots of information saying you should do it and here's why, and you don't have much information as to why you shouldn't do it, then you're going to go ahead with that decision. You're going to say yes. The whole point of this whole session is to help you make a better decision by basically offering you information, getting information into your brain, helping you to receive information at a much deeper level, at the feeling level, so that when you think of the reasons why you shouldn't smoke, make those reasons stronger, much stronger than the reasons why I should smoke. I shouldn't smoke, I should smoke. When the feelings that you have for not wanting to smoke are stronger, then that's what you do. That's it. It's the reverse of where you are at the moment. And that's really the whole purpose of it. So look, we'll talk about a few more things when you come here, but this is just to prepare your mind for it. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you.